strikes on Poltava and Odesa. How the collaborator, known as the mayor of Luhansk, exploded, and a word of caution about poisonous shawarma. These and other topics today on TSN. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, watch, and leave your comments. And here's what else we'll be talking about next. Will Ukraine's patriots have anything to shoot down enemy missiles with?
I want to emphasize, this is not a halt to American aid to Ukraine.
What are they saying in the United States about the taboo on certain types of weapons? And why did the Trump administration's decision shock even the Republicans? Twice today, during the day and in the evening, the Russians attacked Odesa with ballistic missiles, and both times they hit the port. During the first attack, 2 people were killed. They were employees of the port infrastructure, and 6 others were wounded, including 2 foreign sailors. And at night, a drone struck a 9-story building in Odesa. 6 people were injured, including 2 children. One of the building's entrances is in critical condition, with a risk of structural collapse. 6 apartments were completely destroyed, and another 36 were damaged. Elena Chernyeva will now give you the details.
Another hellish night in Odesa. The explosion went off in the middle of the night. 11 people ended up trapped in their apartments. Rescuers pulled them out from the fire and smoke. There were no fatalities, but an entire entrance was destroyed.
A drone crashed into the building at the level of the 7th floor, sparking a fire. The stairs in the entrance collapsed. Everyone who was above got trapped. People were calling for help from their balconies. The fire was really intense. Right here, everything was burning. So, a truck arrived on the opposite side of the building, and from that side they evacuated. They evacuated my neighbor from the 9th floor with her 2 children, and they evacuated the girl who was screaming. Miss Nadia is spending the night outdoors and calming her cat, Manu. On her lap is a folder with documents. That's all that survived. No apartment, no belongings.
I was standing in a bathroom, standing there, and the 3rd strike hit our building. The 3rd, Shahid. First there was 1 loud boom, then a 2nd, and the 3rd one hit our building. Everything started to crumble. Everything began to collapse. The door was locked. Firefighters and rescuers came in and started getting everyone out, even left the documents behind. But the rescuers brought out the documents and the cat, and they said we won't be able to live here anymore. We don't know what will happen next. That's it. We're left with nothing. I left just as I was sleeping. That's how I stayed.
Since last night, people have been sitting in the yard near the building and at the resilience point nearby. They hear the rumble of falling structures and realize it's unlikely they'll be able to return to their homes.
We didn't have time to get out. We were running as it hit, when it exploded. The kids were with the kids. The children, of course, got really scared. The kids were taken away. Well, my sister took them to Slovakia. They left at night. My husband is there, applying for an apartment. The scariest thing is that none of the neighbors, no one made it out in time. Everyone was running already when the explosion started. Basically everyone, no one got out ahead of time.
6 apartments were destroyed by fire and blast. The entire entrance may need dismantling. Inside, the stairwells and structures have collapsed. For a 9-story panel building, such damage is critical.
Right now, rescuers are carrying out emergency work because there's a risk that some structural elements could collapse. And honestly, it's just luck that there are no fatalities today, because while we were working, those structural collapses happened. Today we used a special device, a seismic instrument. We were monitoring and checking the walls, watering them, to see if there was any risk that they might collapse. This was done specifically for the safety of our personnel. After a strike like that, it's honestly a miracle that no one was killed.
The fighters had to carry an elderly woman out from the 2nd floor.
She had leg problems, couldn't get out alone. Thanks to rescuers, they carried her out. Everything's fine. Of course, she had a nervous breakdown, was shaken, but thank God, it turned out okay. Rescuers got keys, entered, carried her out, and all is well.
She is with our rescuers' crutches.
You can use the crutches.
11 people evacuated from the fire, including 2 children aged 7 and 9. They were taken to the hospital. They were poisoned by carbon monoxide. The adults were given assistance on the spot. Alina Chernieva, Ivan Savchenko, Odessa, TSN 1+1.
2 dead and 47 injured in strikes on Poltava. Emergency recovery work at the impact site has been completed. Explosions in the city occurred around 9 in the morning. The occupiers struck with drones in the area of the military enlistment office buildings. This was reported by the ground forces. There are dead and wounded, including civilians. Among the injured are a police officer, 2 military personnel from the recruitment center, and 2 female employees of the armed forces. Fires broke out. One raged in the enlistment office building, and another in a nearby private house. As a result of the attack, apartment buildings, private homes, shops, and cars were destroyed. Emergency services are working at the scene. The Russians attacked Konotop in the Sumy region at 10:30 in the morning. Several explosions sounded one after another. Later, locals filmed black smoke. According to the mayor, an infrastructure facility was destroyed as a result of the attack. There are no casualties. Enemy drones also caused trouble in Kherson this morning. There, 2 people were wounded. Another 9 people were injured the day before due to shelling in Antonivka, Znivka, and Kherson. 2 apartment buildings and 7 private houses were damaged. 6 people were killed and another 12 wounded by the occupiers in Donetsk region. In Raysk, part of the Drushkivka community, 3 locals were killed at once and another 3 were wounded. The enemy attacked the village with 5 Garand drones. Pokrovsk was bombarded with bombs and drones. There, 2 people were killed and 3 were injured. And another 5 people were wounded in Kostantinivka. More than 80 Russian attacks just in the first half of a day. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine reports this number of battles on the front line. The enemy army is advancing practically along the entire line of contact. The most active fighting, as usual, is in the Pokrovsk direction. Today, there have been 30 attempts there to break through the Ukrainian defense line. The occupiers are attacking very intensively in the Novopavlivka, Toretsk, Kurakov, Lyman, and southern Slobozansky sectors. Every day, our defenders push back the invaders in dozens of battles in these directions. The enemy army hasn't lost hope and is also storming near Toretsk, Kupiansk, and Kramatorsk. And yesterday, the enemy also attacked Kherson region from the air. These are dozens of populated areas where civilians live. Ukrainian soldiers, on the other hand, are destroying Russian bases where the occupiers gather. 8 just in the past day, as well as their equipment, command posts, artillery systems, air defense assets, and ammunition depots. There were strikes on a military airfield and a factory in Russia. By morning, the authorities of the aggressor country reported drone attacks in 4 regions. Explosions were heard, in particular, in Lipetsk, where there is an airfield with Su-34, Su-35, and MiG aircraft. And also in Ilyets, where the Energia battery plant is, or rather, was operating. It manufactures spare parts, including for drones, as well as batteries for Russian aircraft and the Navy. In another part of the city, according to the governor, a fire broke out at the parking lot of one of the enterprises after a drone crashed, though they did not specify which enterprise. People were evacuated from the workshops. There are reportedly no casualties or injuries. According to the same governor, another drone hit a section of an apartment building still under construction, as well as a private residential house in the district. 1 person is said to have died, and 2 others were injured. In the morning, the Russian Ministry of Defense reported that, allegedly, their air defense systems had destroyed 69 Ukrainian drones. At the same time, hostile telegram channels wrote about temporary flight restrictions at airports in the Saratov and Tambov regions. Most recently, the governor reported a fire at a gunpowder factory, which had previously been hit by drones. According to Russian media, 3 people died there and 3 more were injured.
There he is. It's flying. Is that a motorcycle? Oh, looks like it's a bike. Whoa. Oh there. Ha. Unbelievable. Now that's a string of lights in the yard. I've never seen anything like this before, guys.
However, the biggest blaze of the day likely happened in the occupied part of Donetsk region. The Security Service of Ukraine confirmed an attack on ammunition depots near Kartsysk. This is not far from the temporarily occupied Makiivka and Donetsk. The Russians have turned the city and its surroundings into a rear base, setting up command posts, logistics centers, and ammunition depots there. One of these depots, in the village of Velik Orikov, blew up. The ammunition detonated after the explosion, and then a fire broke out. Elimination of the Gauleiter. In occupied Luhansk, the former so-called People's Mayor Manolis Pilavov was killed. The Security Service of Ukraine has already claimed responsibility for eliminating one of the ideologists of the so-called LNR. Pilavov became the head of the city administration back in 2014. He was appointed by militants who, with the help of the Kremlin, seized Luhansk at that time. He ran the occupied Ukrainian city until 2023. In Ukraine, the collaborator was wanted and on sanctions list. He was officially charged, in particular with state treason and aiding the creation of the terrorist organization LNR. The explosion that killed Pilavov and likely another person happened near the local history museum on Taras Shevchenko Street, where the occupiers were supposed to open an exhibition today of photographs and personal belongings of Russian invaders. Who else among the traitors and occupiers should hurry up and visit the local history museum on Shevchenko Street? Let's put it that way. Be sure to write your suggestions in the comments to this broadcast on YouTube. And of course, give us a like and subscribe to the channel. Meanwhile, I continue with the TSN broadcast. We still have important stories ahead. The phone conversation between Trump and Putin. How did Volodymyr Zelensky react to it? The news about today's talks between the presidents of the US and Russia caught the Ukrainian head of state in Denmark, where he was meeting with Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen, President of the European Council Antonio Costa, and President of the European Commission Ursula von der Leyen. I'm not sure they have many ideas in common, Zelensky said about the conversation between Putin and Trump. He also noted that Ukraine has supported the American president's idea of an unconditional ceasefire from the very beginning. And here's what he said about his possible conversation with the Kremlin dictator. I'm not sure they have many ideas in common, many topics in common, because they're completely different people. But if we're talking about Ukraine, we immediately supported the idea of an unconditional ceasefire proposed by President Trump. And I think that in Russia,
only Putin makes the decisions. That's why we need a meeting at the leaders' level if we really want to have peace.
Instead of providing Ukraine with new weapons, the Trump administration is once again freezing those that were promised by his predecessor. And this is shocking even to some Republican congressmen. For example, Brian Fitzpatrick has officially demanded an emergency briefing at the White House and the Department of Defense to clarify the accuracy of these reports, check the country's available reserves of weapons and ammunition, and guarantee that the United States will continue to provide Ukraine with the resources it urgently needs to defend its people. So do we have a chance to receive American Patriots and interceptors for them in the near future, which are vital for protection against Russia? The International Review segment of TSN, with Yana Sliserchuk, has been studying the information leaks and official statements.
After the NATO summit in The Hague, where the other alliance leaders did literally everything to appease Donald Trump, and where Zelensky spoke with him for almost an hour, America is once again blocking already allocated aid, and this is shocking many in Europe. At first, people don't trust this information. Then it turns out, it was just that in Poland, a shipment that was already on its way to Ukraine was blocked. Among other things, it contains 252 guided missiles for HIMARS, 142 Hellfire missiles, 30 Patriot missiles, 25 Stinger missiles, and 8,500 shells. State Department spokesperson Temi Bruce confirms there is a delay, but urges not to draw any conclusions. This is not going to be a factor because we haven't paused sending weapons. This is not a factor at all. We have not put a pause on sending weapons to Ukraine. This is just one situation, one case where there were changes, as you heard from the Department of Defense. There are numerous other options and means regarding the situation with weapons being sent to Ukraine. But I'm not speaking for the Department of Defense. This is not, I emphasize, this is not a suspension of American aid to Ukraine. However, for now, it does look exactly like that. The publication Politico, which was the first to report on the delivery delays, continues to bring news from behind the scenes at the White House. They say that even Trump's closest allies are shocked by such a decision, which, according to journalists, was made unilaterally at the Pentagon under the leadership of a certain Elbridge Colby, the director of policy at the Department of Defense, under the slogan, "We need these weapons more ourselves." At least at the State Department, that is, the American equivalent of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they knew nothing about this.
Right now, at the working level between Ukraine and the United States, all the details regarding the provision of defense support are being clarified, including the air defense component. One way or another, we have to ensure protection for our people.
The response from Defense Department spokesperson Sean Parnell is extremely vague. The Pentagon is not ready to report to the public. This confirms what Politico reported, that most people in Washington did not expect this.
Regarding aid to Ukraine, right now, the United States says they are planning to withhold certain assistance. Ukraine responds that this will only push Russia toward further aggression. And what do you have to say about that?
He stated this even during the election campaign, that he just wants to stop people from dying. Here at the department, we support these goals and missions. We have established a framework to analyze which munitions are sent where, to help the President and the Secretary of Defense make decisions. Our task here at the Department of Defense is to put the President's credo into action, America first.
In an op-ed for the New York Times, former advisor to previous President Biden, Jake Sullivan, writes, with his latest massive strikes on Ukraine, Putin is not just trying to deplete Ukraine's stockpiles. He also wants to test how America will respond. And so far, there is nothing the Kremlin doesn't like. The less weapons are supplied to Ukraine, the sooner the war will end, says Putin's spokesperson, unable to hide a smile. Ukraine has nothing to replace the Patriot systems with. This is our only defense against Russian Iskanders and Kinzhals. Several European governments are already considering the possibility of purchasing American weapons, reports Politico, in order to then transfer them to Ukraine. Yana Sliserchuk, TSN 1+1.
The suspension of arms supplies to Ukraine was also criticized by former CIA director and U.S. Secretary of State under Donald Trump's first term, Mike Pompeo. In a post on the social network X, the Republican, who had previously accused the Biden administration of not supporting Ukraine enough, openly disagreed with the stance of his former boss as well.
Ukraine has never asked America to send paratroopers from the 82nd Brigade. They asked for weapons so they could defend their homeland and their people from Russian attacks themselves. If we allow Russia to win the war, it will be an irreversible disaster for the American people and our security around the world.
A rare atmospheric phenomenon was recorded in Sumy region, noctilucent clouds. Photos of the unusual sky were published by the Regional Hydrometeorological Center. Experts explained, this kind of natural magic can only be observed at twilight in the summer. Noctilucent clouds are formed from ice crystals and seem to glow with a pearly light. Meteorologists say these are the clouds of the highest layer of Earth's atmosphere. Thanks to reflected light, they are illuminated at an altitude of about 80 kilometers. And today, real summer heat has finally reached most Ukrainians. By the way, let us know how you're handling it. Is anyone already missing those cloudy but comfortable 20-degree days? Well, on that note, I'm wrapping up this TSN broadcast. Subscribe to our channel and hit the bell so you never miss our exclusives. And before you go, take a quick look at a brief summary of what this Thursday, July 3rd, was like. The Russians attacked the Odesa port with ballistic missiles, and at night an enemy drone hit a local 9-story building. 6 people were injured, including 2 children. One of the building entrances is in critical condition and could collapse.
We didn't have time to get out. We were running down the stairwell when it exploded. kids were, of course, very scared.
2 people were killed and about 50 injured in Poltava. Explosions rang out in the city around 9 in the morning. The occupiers struck with drones in the area of the TCC buildings. As a result of the attack, apartment buildings, private homes, shops, and cars were damaged. Drone attacks targeted 4 Russian regions. Explosions were heard in Lipetsk, where an airfield with Su-34s, Su-35s, and MiGs is located. And also in Ilyets, where there is a battery factory that produces parts for drones and batteries for aircraft and the Navy. The Russians reported allegedly shooting down 69 Ukrainian drones at airports in the Saratov and Tambov regions and restricted flights. The SBU attack on an ammunition depot near Kartsysk in the occupied part of Donetsk region. The Russians had a rear base here, set up command posts, logistics centers, and ammunition depots. One of these, in the village of Velik Orikov, went up in flames. The ammunition detonated, and after the explosion, a fire broke out. Russian Major General Mikhail Gudikov was eliminated, killed in the Kursk region. He was the deputy commander of the Navy of the terrorist state. The officer was at the command post in Koronivo, Kursk region, which was struck by Ukrainian defense forces. Along with the Russian general, about a dozen other senior officers were also killed. The Security Service of Ukraine detained a major of the Ukrainian Air Force, who was also an agent of Russia's FSB. They caught the mole in Lviv region, thereby thwarting the occupiers' attempt to obtain the coordinates of Ukraine's aviation infrastructure. Investigators found out that the Russians recruited the officer through his ex-wife, a former military officer who now works for the occupiers in Melitopol.
State treason committed by a group of individuals in collusion during martial law.
The U.S. State Department denies stopping aid to Ukraine, but confirmed that the shipment of certain types of weapons has been put on hold. This decision by Trump's team has angered even some American congressmen.
If we allow Russia to win the war, it will be an irreversible disaster for the American people.
In Kiev, people said their goodbyes to F-16 pilot, first-class aviator Maxim Ostemenko, known by the call sign Smock. He died on the night of June 29th while repelling yet another Russian attack on the capital. Smock, one of the ghosts of Kiev, was the first pilot to shoot down Russian cruise missiles that attacked the Kiev region back in 2022. The president posthumously awarded Ostemenko the title of Hero of Ukraine.
Thanks to Maxim's actions, we understood and even figured out the enemy's combat tactics. We set up air defenses in the south of Kiev.
An outbreak of salmonellosis in Vinnytsia region. 26 people were hospitalized in moderate condition. Among them were 10 children. All of them are from the city of Kalinivka. Experts suggest that people were poisoned by shawarma at one of the local eateries. The establishment's operations have been suspended, and the site was disinfected. The investigation is ongoing.
The preliminary diagnoses are foodborne toxico-infection, acute intestinal infection, and gastroenterocolitis.